Captain Maya Reeves was flying another regular patrol over the Nevada desert. She was just another skilled F-16 pilot in a group full of talented flyers. Then a mysterious Russian bomber showed up on her radar, and everything changed. Her secret past was about to become impossible to hide. Before you watch the full story, comment below from which country you are watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. The morning sun made long shadows across Nellis Air Force Base as Captain Maya Reeves finished her pre-flight check of the F-16 Fighting Falcon. Her gloved hand ran along the aircraft's smooth body with the practiced skill of a pilot who had done this many times before. The Nevada desert stretched on forever beyond the runway. Its huge emptiness was a perfect training area for the regular patrol mission that was coming. Maya's squadron friends were already gathering near their aircraft. Their friendly talking carried across the flight line as they prepared for what everyone thought would be another normal air defense patrol over controlled airspace. Lieutenant Brad Morrison called out something about getting drinks after the mission. His voice was full of the easy confidence that came from flying missions, where the biggest danger was usually broken equipment rather than enemy contact. Maya smiled and waved back, pulling on her helmet and climbing into the cockpit with movements so smooth they seemed almost like a dance. Nobody watching her that morning had any reason to think that Captain Reeves was anything more than a skilled fighter pilot handling regular assignments. She was just another professional pilot in a squadron full of skilled flyers who spent their days doing training, exercises, and staying ready for threats that rarely showed up in the post-Cold War time of air defense operations. The tower cleared her for takeoff at 7:30 in the morning, and Maya went through her final checks with careful attention before moving the throttle forward and feeling the F-16's powerful engine push her back into her seat as the aircraft sped down the runway. The Fighting Falcon lifted smoothly into the clear morning sky, and Maya turned eastward toward her assigned patrol area, a rectangular block of airspace over the remote desert where she would spend the next 2 hours watching her radar, keeping radio contact with ground control, and flying the kind of regular flight patterns that defined modern peacetime air defense operations. The cockpit displays glowed with familiar information as she climbed to her patrol height of 28,000 feet, and the radio crackled with routine position reports from other aircraft operating in the area. Ground control told her she had arrived in the patrol area with the board efficiency of controllers who had guided countless similar missions, treating Maya exactly like every other pilot flying standard patrols that day. Her wingman, Captain Jason Chun, flew in loose formation 3 miles off her right side. His F-16 was visible as a dark dot against the bright sky. They had flown together dozens of times, and Jason thought Maya was a solid pilot, but nothing special, someone who flew by the rules and handled her aircraft with skill that never suggested anything beyond standard training and regular experience. What nobody in her current squadron knew was that Maya's personnel file had 17 pages of classified information that had been carefully hidden from her official service record. These pages detailed her 3 years with the 427th Special Operations Squadron, where she had flown missions that went far beyond anything covered in regular fighter pilot training. Her previous assignment had involved flying modified F-16s to support intelligence gathering operations along dangerous borders, intercepting and following foreign military aircraft that came too close to sensitive locations, and doing classified spy missions that required skills most fighter pilots never developed. During their entire careers, Maya had faced real enemy aircraft on 7 separate time situations, where the wrong decision could have started international incidents or resulted in actual combat. She had learned to read the subtle signs that told the difference between a routine border patrol and a spying mission. to recognize the flight patterns of bombers from 6 different countries, and to do intercept procedures that balanced aggressive positioning with carefully measured restraint. The Air Force had buried that experience deep in her classified record when she transferred to her current squadron, wanting to keep her special skills in reserve while she flew routine patrols that helped keep up the appearance of normal operations at one of America's most visible training bases. Maya was 40 minutes into her patrol, watching the empty radar display while her mind wandered through the mental math involved in planning her upcoming move to a new apartment off base, when the PG-68 radar suddenly painted a contact at the far edge of its range. The target appeared as a small dot on her screen, moving slowly at about 35,000 feet and flying a northwesterly direction that would bring it across the southern edge of her patrol area within 15 minutes. Maya's training kicked in automatically as she locked onto the contact and began gathering information. Her thumb worked the controls to question the unknown aircraft's transponder. The answer came back scrambled, showing a partial code that didn't match any scheduled civilian traffic in the area and showed none of the standard military transponder codes that would identify it as a friendly aircraft operating in controlled airspace. She pressed her radio button and called ground control. Her voice carried the calm professionalism that defined all her communications. Sierra Control, Viper 21. I have unknown traffic bearing 035, range 80 nautical miles, altitude Angels 35, heading 310. Transponder return is incomplete. Requesting identification. The response from ground control came after a short pause, and Maya detected a small shift in the controller's tone that suggested he was checking his displays and finding nothing that explained her contact. Viper 21, Sierra Control copies unknown traffic. Stand by while we compare with regional radar. The professional distance in the controller's voice told Maya he was following standard procedures, treating this as a routine identification problem that would likely solve itself once they cross-referenced her radar contact with the complete picture kept by ground-based systems. But something about the contact bothered Maya in ways she couldn't immediately explain, some combination of its height, speed, and position that triggered instincts developed during her classified assignments, when she had learned to recognize patterns that showed something more serious than simple navigation errors or equipment problems. Asterisk. She narrowed her radar focus and studied the contact more carefully, noticing how it kept a perfectly steady course and height, without the small changes that were normal for civilian traffic or the exact patterns that defined military training flights. The aircraft was flying like something on a mission, like a bomber carrying out a carefully planned entry into controlled airspace with the kind of deliberate purpose that suggested hostile intent or, at minimum, a serious security breach. Sierra Control came back on the radio with information that confirmed Maya's growing worry. The controller's voice now carried a harder edge that showed the situation had gotten worse than routine identification procedures. Viper 21, Sierra Control confirms no scheduled traffic in that area. NORAD has no match with filed flight plans. Unknown traffic is classified as unidentified aircraft. You are directed to close for visual identification. Weapons hold. Repeat, weapons hold. Maintain radio contact and prepare to carry out standard intercept procedures. Maya confirmed the order and turned her F-16 toward the contact, moving her throttle to full power and feeling the fighter speed up as she closed the distance to the unknown aircraft. Her wingman followed her lead without hesitation. Chun's voice came across the tactical frequency with a question about whether she thought they were dealing with a lost civilian or something more serious. Maya kept her response neutral, not wanting to share her suspicions until she had more information. But her mind was already running through the special intercept procedures she had learned during her classified Assignments procedures that went far beyond the standard training that Chun and her other squadron friends had received. Asterisk. The distance to the unknown contact got smaller steadily as Maya pushed her F-16 to 450 knots. The desert landscape far below became a blur as she focused entirely on her instruments and the growing clarity of the radar return ahead. At 40 nautical miles, her radar provided enough detail for Maya to begin studying the contact's features. And what she saw made her pulse quicken with recognition that came from experience most fighter pilots never gained. The radar cross-section was large, much bigger than any civilian aircraft normally flying at that height, and the return showed multiple separate points that suggested a multi-engine aircraft with significant size and weight. The flight pattern remained unusually steady, showing none of the small height or direction changes that civilian pilots made in response to air traffic control instructions or normal navigation adjustments. This was an aircraft flying with purpose, following a planned course with the kind of exactness that showed either advanced autopilot systems or a very experienced crew carrying out a carefully planned mission. Maya's special training provided background that made her more and more certain she was looking at a bomber, though whether it was a hostile military aircraft, a foreign spy plane, or something else entirely remained unclear. Until she could close in for visual identification, Sierra Control had apparently reached similar conclusions because the controller's next message carried a tone of controlled urgency that showed higher command authorities were now watching the situation. Viper 21, Sierra Control, be advised NORAD has upgraded the contact to potential hostile. You are cleared to close for positive identification and carry out standard intercept procedures. Command Authority is monitoring this frequency. Report visual contact immediately. Maya confirmed while scanning her instruments and running through mental calculations about intercept geometry, closing rates, and positioning that would allow her to identify the unknown aircraft while keeping tactical advantage in case the situation got worse into something requiring defensive action. She pulled back slightly on her throttle to control her approach speed, wanting to avoid flying past the contact and having to circle back for another try at visual identification. Chun moved into a supporting position, 3 miles behind and slightly above Maya's aircraft, giving him clear sight lines and positioning that would allow him to watch the intercept, while keeping enough separation to respond to any unexpected developments. At 15 nautical miles, Maya began her final approach to the unknown aircraft, dropping slightly to position herself below and behind the contact where she could carry out the standard intercept procedure of closing from the target's 6 o'clock position before moving alongside for visual identification. The contact stayed steady on its course, showing no sign that its crew had detected her approach or taken any action to avoid or acknowledge the intercepting fighters. Maya's radar warning receiver stayed silent, showing the unknown aircraft was not actively scanning with fire control radar or taking any clearly hostile action. But the lack of response was itself worrying because any legitimate aircraft operating in controlled airspace should have been monitoring emergency frequencies and responding to the presence of military fighters carrying out intercept procedures. The silence suggested either equipment failure, deliberate radio silence, or a crew that had reasons for avoiding contact with American military forces. None of those possibilities pointed toward innocent explanations, and Maya felt her awareness getting sharper as she closed the final miles to visual range. At 5 nautical miles, Maya spotted the contact visually, and what she saw made her breath catch despite her years of experience and special training in identifying foreign military aircraft. The bomber was huge, a 4-engine strategic plane with swept wings and a special profile that Maya recognized immediately from classified briefings she had received during her special Operations assignment. She was looking at a Tu-95 Bear, a Russian strategic bomber that had no good reason to be flying in American-controlled airspace and whose presence represented a serious security breach that could mean anything from a deliberate provocation to an actual attack mission. The aircraft's turboprop engines drove massive, counter-rotating propellers that left distinctive contrails in the thin air, and Maya could see the bomber's distinctive tail gunner position and the bulges along its body that held various sensors and electronic warfare equipment. Her mind raced through everything she knew about the Bear from her classified training, remembering that these aircraft usually carried cruise missiles with nuclear or regular warheads, operated with crews of 7 to 10 people, and represented one of Russia's main strategic strike platforms. Despite their Cold War-era design, Maya pressed her radio button with deliberate calm, knowing that her next words would set off alarm bells throughout the military command structure and possibly set in motion response procedures that could go all the way to the National Command Authority. Sierra Control, Viper 21 has visual contact with unknown aircraft. Positive identification of a Russian Tu-95 Bear strategic bomber, 4-engine turboprop configuration. No visible external stores, but cannot confirm weapons load. Aircraft is maintaining course 310, speed about 300 knots. Altitude steady at Angels 35. Crew appears unaware of my presence. Requesting further instructions. The radio fell silent for several long seconds, and Maya imagined the controlled chaos that her report had just triggered in command centers across the military network. An unidentified Russian bomber entering American airspace represented exactly the kind of crisis situation that defense planners spent careers preparing for but rarely expected to actually face during peacetime operations. When Sierra Control responded, a different voice had taken over the frequency, senior and commanding in ways that told Maya she was now speaking directly to a high-ranking officer with big command responsibility. Viper 21, this is Sierra Actual. Maintain visual contact with the Bear and carry out standard intercept positioning. Do not repeat, do not take any hostile action unless the aircraft shows clear hostile intent. We are coordinating with NORAD and National Command Authority. Stand by for further instructions while we set up direct communication channels with Russian military authorities. Maya confirmed while moving her F-16 into position alongside the massive bomber, carrying out the careful approach that brought her fighter from behind and below the Tu-95 before sliding up alongside its left wing, where her aircraft would be clearly visible to the bomber's crew. She steadied her F-16 about 200 feet off the Bear's wing, close enough to clearly see the aircraft and its crew, but far enough to avoid any air interference or risk of collision. Through the bomber's cockpit windows, Maya could see Russian aircrew members moving through their flight deck, and she noticed with professional interest that they showed no immediate reaction to her presence, despite the fact that an American fighter aircraft had just appeared on their wing in the middle of controlled American airspace. The lack of reaction from the Russian crew struck Maya as wrong in ways that her special experience helped her recognize as important. During her classified assignments, she had done similar intercepts of foreign military aircraft, and the normal pattern involved immediate recognition followed by either radio communication or hand signals acknowledging the intercepting fighter's presence. The crew she had met during those missions had understood they were operating in gray areas where international rules and professional military courtesy controlled behavior even when underlying tensions ran high. But the Bear's crew seemed to be ignoring her presence entirely, continuing their mission as if an armed American fighter aircraft positioned on their wing was completely unimportant to their operations. That suggested either extraordinary discipline, deliberate provocation, or something wrong with the bomber's crew that went beyond normal working behavior. Maya studied the aircraft more carefully, looking for any details that might explain the unusual situation while keeping her position and watching her instruments for any changes in the bomber's flight pattern or any sign of hostile intent. What Maya noticed made her reconsider her first assessment of the situation because the Tu-95 showed subtle signs that suggested this was not a routine intelligence-gathering flight or the kind of deliberate border testing that Russian military aircraft sometimes did to test American response times and procedures. The bomber's external weapons positions were empty, ruling out an active attack setup. But Maya spotted what appeared to be non-standard equipment installations along the body that suggested changes beyond the bear's normal sensor suite. The aircraft's paint job showed wear patterns that didn't match regular Russian military maintenance standards. And when Maya focused her attention on the cockpit, she noticed that the crew members visible through the windows appeared to be moving with unusual urgency that didn't match the steady, controlled behavior she would expect from experienced bomber crews carrying out planned missions. Something was wrong aboard that aircraft, something that changed this from a straightforward intercept of a hostile military intrusion into something more complicated and possibly more dangerous than simple border violation. Sierra Actual came back on the frequency with an update that confirmed the situation had gotten worse to the highest levels of military and political attention. Viper 21, Sierra Actual. Be advised that National Command Authority is trying to set up direct communication with Russian military command through diplomatic channels. Initial response from Russian authorities shows they have no knowledge of any Tu-95 operations in North American airspace and are treating this as a possible rogue aircraft situation. You are directed to maintain visual contact and try radio communication on all emergency frequencies. If the aircraft changes course toward any populated areas or strategic locations, you are authorized to carry out warning procedures and, if necessary, to take defensive action to protect national security interests. Confirm these instructions. Maya felt a cold clarity settle over her as she confirmed the order, recognizing that she had just received authorization that basically placed the life or death decision about this situation in her hands. The phrase defensive action was military code for shooting down the bomber if it posed an immediate threat. And the fact that National Command Authority had given that decision to her showed the seriousness of the situation and the limited time available for political solutions. Maya switched through emergency frequencies, broadcasting in the clear and hoping the Bear's crew would respond to direct communication, even if they were keeping radio silence on military channels. Russian aircraft. This is United States Air Force fighter on your left wing. You are operating in United States-controlled airspace without permission. Confirm this message and state your intentions immediately. She repeated the message in Russian, using language training from her classified assignments, and waited for any response that might clarify whether she was dealing with a hostile military operation, a rogue crew, or some other situation that would explain the bomber's unexplainable presence. The radio stayed silent except for the background static. But Maya noticed movement in the Bear's cockpit that suggested her messages were being received, even if the crew chose not to respond. One of the Russian pilots turned his head toward her F-16, and even at 200 feet distance, Maya could see the tension in his body language and what appeared to be a heated discussion among the visible crew members. Chun's voice came across the tactical frequency with a question that cut through the tension. His tone reflected the stress of a pilot facing a situation far beyond anything his training or experience. Lead, what's your assessment? Are we looking at a hostile entry or something else? Maya thought about her response carefully, knowing that her words would shape how her wingmen approached the situation and might influence command decisions being made in real time as senior officers watched their communications. Her special training gave her understanding that standard fighter pilot experience didn't provide. Understanding developed through similar encounters where she had learned to tell the difference between different types of airspace violations and the right responses to each situation. The Bears' unusual behavior, combined with the Russian military's apparent lack of knowledge about the flight, suggested a crew acting without proper permission rather than a deliberate military operation. That made the situation possibly more dangerous, because rogue operations were unpredictable in ways that standard military missions rarely were, driven by unknown reasons and lacking the command structure that normally forced restraint and rules on military aircraft operations. Maya was thinking through her response when the Bears' flight pattern suddenly changed. The massive bomber turned gently to the right and began a turn that would take it on a more northerly direction away from its previous course. The move was done smoothly, showing the kind of professional crew coordination that argued against equipment failure or complete loss of control. But the new direction pointed the bomber more directly toward the Nevada test and training range, where some of America's most sensitive military locations were. Maya's threat assessment changed immediately as she recognized what the course change meant, because a Russian bomber heading toward restricted military areas could not be seen as anything but hostile intent, regardless of whether the crew was operating under proper authority. She matched the bomber's turn while keeping her position on its wing, and her voice carried new urgency when she sent messages both to the Bears crew and to Sierra Control. Russian aircraft, you are turning toward restricted military airspace. Change your course immediately to heading 270, or you will be considered hostile. Sierra Actual, Viper 21, contact has changed course toward restricted areas. Request immediate guidance on rules of engagement. The response from Sierra Actual came with battlefield efficiency that showed the seriousness of the situation and the limited time available for solving it through non-lethal means. Viper 21, Sierra Actual, you are authorized to carry out full warning procedures. If the aircraft does not respond to warnings and continues toward restricted airspace, you have permission to engage with intent to disable or destroy. National Command Authority is monitoring and confirms these orders. Maya confirmed, while her mind shifted into the combat mindset that her classified training had developed, a mental state where emotion became background noise and decision-making followed practiced patterns that balanced threat assessment with matching response. She knew the procedures for going from warnings to actual fighting, had practiced them countless times in simulators and during classified exercises that most fighter pilots never experienced, and understood exactly how to carry out each step while keeping clear records of hostile intent that would justify her actions in the certain after-action reviews. Maya started the warning procedures by moving her F-16 directly ahead of the Bear, making a sharp turn that brought her fighter across the bomber's nose at a distance of about 1,000 feet. The move was designed to show her fighter's ability and position, while forcing the bomber's crew to notice the intercepting aircraft they had been ignoring. She rocked her wings in the international signal for follow me, showing that the Bear should change course and follow her away from the restricted areas. The Russian crew's response told Maya everything she needed to know about how serious the situation was, because instead of responding to her signal or changing course, the bomber kept its direction with the same steady determination that had been part of its flight pattern since she first detected it on radar. That deliberate refusal to respond changed the situation from an unclear airspace violation into clear hostile intent, meeting the standards that authorized going up to Actual combat if necessary to protect national security. Maya moved back alongside the bear and sent a final warning that laid out the consequences with clear understanding. Russian aircraft, this is your final warning. You are approaching restricted military airspace and have failed to respond to intercept procedures. If you do not change course immediately, I am authorized to engage and will use all necessary force to prevent your entry into restricted areas. Confirm this message and change course now. She repeated the message in Russian while watching the bomber's cockpit and studying every detail of the crew's visible reactions. Through the cockpit windows, Maya could see what appeared to be an argument among the Russian officers, big gestures, and body language that suggested internal disagreement about how to respond to the situation. One crew member pointed toward Maya's aircraft while apparently speaking urgently, but another crew member shook his head, firmly in what looked like refusal to change their mission. The internal struggle gave Maya a moment of hope that some group aboard the bear recognized the danger and might win in forcing a course change. But the bomber's direction stayed steady even as the distance to restricted airspace got smaller with every passing second. Sierra Actual's next message carried the weight of decisions made at the highest levels of command words that gave Maya clear permission to use deadly force while leaving the final fighting decision in her hands, based on her assessment of immediate threat. Viper 21, Sierra Actual, you have permission to fire warning shots ahead of the target aircraft. If warning shots do not make it change course, you have permission to engage with intent to disable the aircraft. Rules of engagement are now active. Use your judgment based on immediate threat assessment and keep records of all hostile actions. Maya confirmed while changing from warning procedures to combat preparation. Her hands moved through practice sequences as she armed her weapon systems and prepared to carry out the step-by-step response that rules required. Her special training had included situations, exactly like the situations where things had to get worse through clearly defined steps that showed restraint while building a clear record of hostile intent that would justify deadly action. Maya selected her M61 Vulcan cannon and positioned her F-16 ahead and above the bear's flight path, figuring out the angles that would let her fire a burst across the bomber's nose without risk of actually hitting the aircraft. She pressed her radio button one final time before firing the warning shots, giving the Russian crew their last chance to avoid things getting worse. Russian aircraft, I am preparing to fire warning shots across your nose. This is your final chance to change course before I am forced to engage directly. Turn to heading 270 immediately. The bomber kept its course, and Maya made her decision, with the cold certainty that her training had developed for moments exactly like this. She squeezed the trigger and felt her F-16 shake slightly as the Vulcan cannon spit out a 2-second burst of 20mm rounds that streaked a path about 500 feet ahead of the bomber's nose. The tracers left bright lines through the air that were impossible to miss or misunderstand. This was it. The effect of the warning shots was immediate and dramatic, showing that the bear's crew had been completely aware of the situation all along and had been choosing to ignore the intercept procedures rather than failing to recognize them. The massive bomber turned sharply to the left, banking into a steep turn that pushed the limits of the aircraft's ability to turn and suggested a crew responding to immediate danger rather than following planned procedures. Maya turned hard to follow while calling out the dramatic course change to Sierra Control and watching carefully for any sign that the bomber might be changing from escape to actual hostile action. The bear's turn settled on a westerly direction that would take it away from restricted areas and back toward international airspace, and Maya detected what might have been a message in Russian over one of the emergency frequencies, though the signal was too broken to understand clearly. She kept her position off the bomber's wing while the aircraft finished its turn and settled on its new course. and she noticed that the previously tense activity in the cockpit had been replaced by what looked like defeated giving up as the Russian crew apparently abandoned whatever mission had brought them into American airspace. Sierra Actual came back on the frequency with recognition of the successful intercept and new instructions. That shifted the situation from immediate crisis to controlled solution. Viper 21, Sierra Actual. Excellent work on the intercept and warning procedures. National Command Authority has set up communication with Russian military authorities who have confirmed this is a rogue crew operating without permission. You are directed to escort the aircraft to Nellis Air Force Base for taking control and crew detention. Additional fighters are launching to support the escort, and ground forces are being positioned to take custody of the aircraft and crew when they land. Keep visual contact and be prepared for any change in hostile behavior, but current assessment is that immediate threat has been solved. Maya confirmed while settling into escort position close enough to the bear to respond to any unexpected moves, but far enough to avoid unnecessary tension with a crew that had just been forced to give up their mission through direct military action. The escort flight back to Nellis took 40 minutes, and Maya used that time to study the bomber and its crew while thinking through everything that had just happened. The Russian officers visible through the cockpit windows showed the body language of defeated people who understood they were facing serious consequences for their unauthorized mission, whatever its purpose might have been. Maya wondered about their reasons, about what could make experienced military officers break international rules so badly, and about what intelligence value the aircraft and its crew might provide once they were on the ground and questioned by the right authorities. Her role in that analysis would be limited because once the bear landed, security services and intelligence people would take over while she returned to being a regular fighter pilot flying routine assignments. But the special training that had allowed her to handle this crisis would stay in her classified service record, ready for the next situation that needed skills beyond standard operations. Chun had been silent during most of the escort flight, keeping his position and following Maya's lead without questions that might distract from the mission. But as they got close to Nellis and prepared to hand off the captured bomber to base security forces, his voice came across the tactical frequency with a mix of respect and curiosity that Maya recognized as the beginning of new awareness among her squadron friends about her abilities. Lead, that was some seriously impressive flying and decision-making back there. Where exactly did you learn those intercept procedures? That went way beyond anything they taught us in training. Maya smiled inside her helmet, knowing the question would surely lead to guessing and rumors once they were back on the ground. Her response was carefully neutral, designed to avoid rather than reveal the classified details of her background. Just following standard procedures, too, maybe with a little extra emphasis on the importance of clear communication and step-by-step response. We'll go over everything when we land. The landing at Nellis was carefully planned, with Maya and Chun keeping their escort positions while the massive Russian bomber came down on final approach, surrounded by emergency vehicles and security forces that had been set up to take immediate control of the aircraft and its crew. Maya watched from her cockpit as the bear touched down smoothly, its experienced crew showing professional skills even in the middle of their unauthorized mission's failure, and she felt a mixture of relief that the situation had ended without loss of life and satisfaction that her special training had proved necessary when circumstances demanded abilities beyond routine operations. She landed her own F-16 after the bomber had been secured, and as she taxied back to her squadron's area, she could see command staff vehicles already rushing toward the operations building, where she would spend the next several hours in intensive questioning sessions that would record every detail of the intercept and provide the basis for diplomatic protests and intelligence analysis. The following days brought exactly the level of attention that Maya had expected and dreaded, with her squadron friends treating her with new respect bordering on awe, while commanders from higher levels reviewed her actions and praised her handling. of a crisis that could have gotten worse into an international incident or actual combat. The Russian crew, it turned out, had been intelligence officers, operating without proper permission as part of what their government described as an unauthorized entry meant to test American air defense response times and abilities. The political fallout played out at levels far above Maya's rank, but she understood from classified briefings that her intercept had revealed serious gaps in Russian command and control while showing American abilities in ways that would influence strategic thinking for years to come. Her special training, the classified skills that had stayed hidden in her service record while she flew routine patrols, had proved their value in the most dramatic possible way. 3 weeks after the incident, Maya sat in her squadron commander's office, receiving notification of her next assignment. And she wasn't surprised when the orders showed she would be returning to special operations duty with new responsibilities that reflected her shown abilities under crisis conditions. Colonel Martinez studied her across his desk with the kind of honest assessment that recognized everything that couldn't be said directly about her classified background and the role it had played in the successful intercept. Captain Reeves, your performance during the Bear incident was exactly what we need from our most capable pilots. The Air Force has very few officers with your combination of flying skills, combat experience, and crisis decision-making abilities. Your new assignment will require everything you've learned and probably push you even further. Are you ready for that level of responsibility? Maya met her commander's eyes and thought about the moment when she had fired warning shots across a Russian bomber's nose, about the weight of decisions that could have led to deadly fighting, and about the special training that had prepared her for exactly those kinds of impossible choices. She had spent months flying routine patrols while her classified skills stayed unused, had been treated as just another skilled pilot handling regular assignments, and had proven when circumstances demanded it that some abilities couldn't be replaced by standard training or routine experience. The unknown bomber appearing on her radar had changed a routine mission into a crisis that revealed everything about who she really was beneath the surface of regular operations. Her answer to Colonel Martinez came without hesitation, carrying the quiet confidence of someone who had already faced the worst possible situations and come through with both ability and good judgment still whole. Yes, sir. I'm ready. Whatever the mission requires. The morning sun made long shadows across Nellis Air Force Base as Maya finished her final flight in routine patrol status, knowing that her next assignment would take her back into the world of classified operations where threats were real and abilities were tested in ways that most fighter pilots never experienced. She had been just an F-16 pilot, skilled and professional, but unremarkable in the eyes of her squadron until an unknown bomber had appeared on her radar and demanded everything that her hidden training had developed. The crisis had revealed her true abilities to commanders who needed pilots with exactly her combination of skills. And now her career would show that reality rather than the comfortable pretend story of routine assignments. As Maya packed her gear and prepared for the move to her new role, she felt no regrets about leaving behind the simplicity of regular patrols. Some pilots were meant for routine operations, and some were meant for the impossible missions that required abilities beyond standard training. The unknown bomber had proven which group she belonged in, and Maya was ready to accept everything that recognition would demand from her in the challenging assignments that lay ahead.